Welcome to our Strategic Partner Series. This series comes out once a month, and within these conversations with coaches and consultants, EOS implementers, predictive index partners, and the like, what you will hear is how these folks walk beside and really support CEOs to implement really strong people strategies inside their organizations. Join me in welcoming our guest for this week. Welcome to this episode of the People Strategy Podcast. I am thrilled to introduce you to Byron Low. Byron is a fellow predictive index partner and coach. So his business is iWoven, where he implements predictive index inside of organizations, then also Big Y coach. What I'm so excited for you to hear about today from Byron is how we take our big whys and implement those inside of our organizations to increase what our bottom lines are. And we do that through our people and through knowing that we're always going to fall back on that thing that is most important to us, that drives us, and really is that thing that definitely lights us up. So with that, I cannot wait for you to hear from Byron. Hey, Byron, I'm really excited to talk to you today about your big why. And what exactly is a big why?
Hi, Traci. Thank you for having me today. And a big why is really this. It's essentially when someone has such a clear purpose, and with purpose comes direction. And when I work with clients, I want them to have such a big why that it fills their field of vision. So that's what they see. And when it's so big and so clear, that's when and how they can inspire others.
Amazing. So it becomes the vehicle to inspire others because it's so incredibly important to them personally.
It has to be important to them personally. If they do not have a purpose, if they do not know themselves, then their leadership in their company will absolutely suffer.
I do a lot of work with leadership teams on performance management and goal setting. I actually had one with a client yesterday, and I introduced this concept of what is your personal goals and what are your professional goals. And those personal goals have to be so incredibly important that you have to have essentially the why and the purpose behind it. And so often what I hear from leaders is, I've never thought about it that way. Why exactly do I have to do that? So I'm curious, how do you really instill that and drive that through to those results?
There's so much in our culture that we've like to separate and kind of bifurcate our personal and our professional. And I think in many ways that's nonsense. We are people, we are human beings, and our personal and professional, it's not about balance. It's about the interwoven nature of our personal and professional. And sure, are there times when you're gonna give more to your career than you can to your family? Absolutely, and that's totally okay. The point is that you have to, as a leader, you have to tap in to what you really believe, to what you really want, to meaning, to what can drive you and what can sustain you, because you have to be disciplined. So it's absolutely the connection of both. The idea of completely separating them, we're not machines, we're not automatons. So that it's almost impossible. So in order for us to excel professionally, we must, it's an imperative. We have to be taking care of ourselves personally.
And I love that because look, it is the same pot of soup. And what happens at home has a direct impact at what happens at work. And guess what? What happens at work also has a direct impact at
Mhm.
what happens in our personal lives. So that key thing about, connection and fulfillment and excitement and engagement, it's all tied together. And so, I'm curious. I know that you coach and you work with, CEOs and business owners all across the country. So, what is important about, the individuals that you work with having that big why? And how do you work with them to really kind of tear away the layers to identify it?
It is absolutely possible to be successful and to be wealthy and not have a big why. Okay. They're not mutually exclusive. So the idea of having a big why when you already are successful, and those are the people I work with. And what ends up happening is that they have an epiphany, they have a realization, kind of like oh my gosh, I can actually be happy and be successful
Mhm.
because there's so many successful people who are incredibly wealthy, but they're just miserable. They're miserable people because they haven't done some of the deep work. Because in our culture, we never ask the question, what do you want to do? We get on this treadmill, we get on this production line, not production line literally, but a production line of career, and we go from one thing to the next, and we never actually think about what it is that we're actually wired to do, and why we're here on this planet to do the kind of work that fulfills us, that gives us meaning. And when we do that kind of work, that actually makes us happier. And what ends up happening is that those folks become more successful and they end up making more money because they're tapping into a true power source for their own benefit.
And I love what you just said, the power source for their own benefit, yet the outcome of that power source ends up being the bottom line on the P&L.
100%. There is an absolute connection to a person's inner work of finding their big why. And this is work. This is not something that you can get by reading a book. I mean, I can literally give you the resources, but if you do not have the guidance of a coach that knows what they're doing, you're not going to be able to find that. You're not going to be able to discover it. But once you do, there's absolutely 100% a connection to your inner work of finding meaning and purpose and direction to the bottom line of your company, but also to the culture. Because what ends up often happening when people discover themselves, they also discover people. Because all of a sudden they realize, oh, I've got this stuff going on. You know what? Mary's got that same stuff going on. All of a sudden, Mary becomes a human being instead of just an object that to do work in your company. And all of a sudden, everyone has the richness, the it's like in a map when you have a relief map, and all of a sudden you can see mountains. Now you can see people in your company, and that to me is it not only provides meaning, it provides this fabric from which you can create a culture where not only are you going to be able to take care of business and make more money in your company, you're going to be able to really have a company of employees that are together and they're moving in the same direction.
I love what you just said there. When you find yourself and your why, you find people. I just spoke at a large conference this week. It was the iLandscape conference, and I did a session called "Stop Bitching and Start Pitching." And one of the feedback, several pieces of feedback I got at the end of that seminar from seminar attendees was, "Traci, you opened my eyes to leadership as personal. I need to connect with every employee as a person and understand what drives them. I just looked at them as employees before. Now I see them as people." That is huge, and that's what I just heard you say.
Ding, 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 ding. Absolutely. And when a leader, because again, we're not given that opportunity much in our culture to hear ourselves and to see ourselves. It's funny in the movie Avatar, James Cameron's Avatar. You know the big gigantic blue people, the Navi. They live on this moon, right on Pandora.
Yeah,
Whenever they greet each other, the way they greet each other is they say, "I see you. I see you." And again, this is not necessarily me, and it's certainly my style for sure. But I help leaders get to the point where they can see themselves. And it's not about arrogance. It's about I use a combination, and they seem kind of contradictory, but it's humble confidence. Because once you see yourself, it's like, wow, this is what I can do. I can see my power. And then when you tap into that power, and then when you start working with other people and you see them, it's so linked. It's so inextricably linked between being able to see another human being and loving them. Love, actually love in the workplace, not like
mhm,
romantic love, but
right.
giving people dignity, honor, and respect where you see them. It's exactly what the attendee communicated with you about being a leader. When you see your employees, not just employees, but as human beings with needs, drives, wants, thoughts. And as leaders, we how are you going to be able to inspire them? And I
Right.
promise you, you will inspire them if you get to know them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because now we're having real conversations and we're not talking past each other. One of the things that you named was, when you're coaching leaders, and I will name this coaching industry is taking off. There's so much to it. And yet, so often when I'm working with leaders in the construction industry, the manufacturing industry, landscape, etc., which has this mindset that's, 200, 500 years old, right? How do you kind of explain why is coaching important? Because what you said was, unless you have a coach helping you to really figure out your purpose, you can't do it. And I kind of hear these folks in my head going, of course I can do it. Why couldn't I do it? So why can't you do it on your own?
The best, the best in any endeavor, they have coaches. If you want to be the best, you get a coach. If you don't want to be the best, then you don't.
Right? And I'm just going to link this to sports. Every single great athlete has a coach, if not several, based on every single area. Here's the thing, we can't see our own crap, right? Like, we can't see our own blind spots. So we need someone, one, to see us bigger than we see ourselves, and two, to help us lovingly point out, hey, did you realize XYZ? And you're like, oh, nope. And I'm committed to this result. So let's go get it.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that a coach provides and offers is this place that is safe. It's first of all, it's a safe place, but it's a place where just what Tracy said. There's this inspiration. There's this like, come on, you can do it. And there's also accountability because I don't. It's like I see myself more as a guide, and like I'm a guide that goes up this mountain. Now I accept and I will say there are multiple ways to get up the mountain, but you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to carry you. We're going to go together. Now, I've been up on many of these paths, but if you want to carve a path that no one's ever taken, I'm game. But I'm not going to carry you. We're going to do this together. You have to use your own legs, your own mind, your own brain to get up the mountain, but we'll do it together.
Right. I can't want it more than you do.
That's exactly right.
Amazing. So, one of the things I so love about our conversation today, Byron, is also the podcast our listeners are going to hear next week. And that is with Jeff Mold of Stony Creek. And Jeff has been one of your clients. And so, how did his big why impact not only the people strategy at Stony Creek, but also his development?
I worked with Jeff before Stony Creek in a he was an executive director, kind of the CEO of a restaurant, and COVID shut that restaurant down. And they were just hitting their stride as an organization. I had worked with them for probably 3 to 4 years. And not all restaurants failed during COVID. Some thrived, but this restaurant, there was just time. And the owner of the restaurant decided it was really time to just simply, go do something else. And he happened to know at the time that he wanted to put and position Jeff into something different at Stony Creek as a CEO. Jeff's big why, which is really about developing people, because Jeff has a big organizational development type heart as a CEO, which is very unusual. But Jeff's big why is all about creating a culture where people are known, are seen. They know they do their job. They know their job. They love their job. They're in the right role. They're in the right seat, and it's kind of like a well-oiled machine. So Jeff's big why was very much something we worked on at this other company before Stony Creek. But the challenge was when you have a CEO who's coming into a new organization, you're not guaranteed that the new people you have on your team, that they're going to accept or adopt your new ideas. And it just so happened that Jeff's style is not one of top down. He wants to come in at eye level, shoulder to shoulder, figure things out, understand, listen, ask questions, and that's exactly what he did. So his big why was it was non-threatening. It was also he wants to be he is the leader, he does inspire, and all of it took a matter of days before all of the leaders in the organization would say, I'll follow Jeff. So his big why was clear enough, and this was August of 2020. So we're still in the middle of COVID, and they didn't even know how it, or if they were going to exist anymore as a company. There was a tremendous amount of work to do. But if Jeff hadn't had, I can say this, and I think Jeff would agree with this. If Jeff hadn't had a big why, Stony Creek wouldn't have lasted. It would have just simply dissolved, and 400 plus people would have lost their jobs.
And so, again, we're hearing the impact of coaching, of really being able to take all these thoughts out of your head and put them out and say, hey, what do I want to do with them? with someone that is holding the space for you to do that without any kind of judgment or any type of, stake in it. There's no confidentiality being breached because they're not inside the business, to really say, hey, here's the why and here's where we're going. What's impactful about 400 people's jobs and livelihood? And how do we do it?
Absolutely. Jim Collins talks about when you have a level 5 leader and when you have a business that is thriving, and there's multiple books that Jim Collins has written, but he talks about when you take a business out of a community, it should hurt the community. If it's a thriving business, and when that business goes away, people are in pain. They mourn the loss of that business. That's exactly the the vision that Jeff had for all 14 of the properties of Stony Creek, that if they cease to exist, it's not just about the employment, it's about the impact that the community will miss when Stony Creek is gone.
And that impact, right? So when we talk about how we inspire people to perform or getting right people in the right role, as a people strategy is, it's not just about what we can receive from our communities, but what do we give to our communities in a way that we're giving more than what we're receiving in terms of value before we ever get a dollar back. So as that people strategy, how do we also do that same exact thing for every single employee?
One of the tools that we implemented right away with Jeff and Stony Creek was the predictive index. The predictive index is such a tool that you can build goodwill even with candidates, because you can have them take the assessment and they're going to get a version of the report, even if they don't accept the job, or even if they're not accepted for the job. And I love it because it's super, super quick to take. It's not like a 20-minute or 30-minute assessment. And it's so incredibly accurate. And it was so fun just to see everyone on that executive team just be like overjoyed and like blown away by the accuracy and the power of that little tool. So I think of building goodwill in a community. All of those 14 properties, they all use the predictive index. Everyone is taking the assessment. All candidates, hundreds and hundreds of candidates per property, take the predictive index. And that's just a little itty bitty piece. But you know what? As far as Stony Creek's brand, it provides that goodwill.
And you know what I love so much about PI is, when I'm doing a read back with a client, and I know you do the same thing, Byron, as we both use PI, when I'm doing a read back with, a prospective, employee or an applicant and say, hey, tell me a little bit about your PI. And they're like, oh my gosh, it was spooky, scary, accurate. Amazing. Now, tell me, what did you learn about it about yourself? And then they start going through all of these things, and then my next question is, how do you use those strengths to get what you want in work so it's fulfilling to you? And just like they're not a client yet necessarily if it's, a prospective client coming on, they're not an employee yet, but that time where they're going, "Oh my gosh, somebody just saw me."
That's
Such
it.
a cool gift. And so when you worked with Jeff, so you implemented predictive index, I know that there's something really magical and meaningful about common language and definitions, especially within mission, vision, value. And I know we're going to hear that from Jeff in a little bit. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
People need story, they need metaphor, they need words in order to connect the dots to ideas and eventually to get to execution. And a part of his job was he wants to get adoption. He wants to get them to be on board. He wants to inspire them. You can't inspire someone without language. You can't inspire someone without some sort of metaphor. So what we did is we brought over some of this some of the language that we worked on together at Vivo. I mean, he actually had this thing called an ethos sheet, which really kind of communicated the ethos of Vivo. He used that kind of like as like a template for what he was going to work on at Stony Creek. But there were also off the shelf, resources that we used in order to help build some of that language. Some of the resources like EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, was really important as far as a tool and resource for language, because that even got down to the nitty gritty of how to actually create goals. And the goals are called something else in EOS, but it's all about goals. And then meetings, making sure you're meeting, because most meetings are a waste of time. EOS creates a framework so that meetings are no longer a waste of time. They're 90 minutes and they're religiously done every single week. So that was also part of the building that language. There was other resources we used, a book from Simon Sinek called The Infinite Game, and really trying to shift the mindset of the executive team where they need to have a mindset of a game that's never going to end, that literally it's infinite. It's never going to end. And then also Jim Collins in the book called Great by Choice, it gave us some more language, some more analogies of bullets before cannonballs or the 20-mile march. All of that became incredibly important for Jeff because it gave him tools, and tools are nothing more than it gives someone a handle where you can pick something up and it becomes useful. It becomes helpful for all of his executives and how the executives work with the people on their teams.
And I think that that's so important of, hey, what are the tools that we're using and that we're giving the tools enough time to create traction and impact that we don't change the tools every 5 minutes.
Amen. Amen. And I think for so many of the CEOs that I've worked with in the past, the shiny object syndrome, or the idea of, oh, we've worked with this tool long enough. And the answer is no, no, no. Commit to a tool. The tools I just shared, those are forever tools. PI, forever, forever. And EOS, I mean, once you get to a certain size with the EOS, I mean, I think you can still use some of the concepts. Maybe that might change, but having a just cause, no, that's forever. I mean, having a 20-mile march, forever. All those things are tools. Once you start to use, you never ever stop using them.
And so with that, we've talked about tools, we've talked about coaching, we've talked about the big why today. So there's a lot of insights throughout our conversation today. What is one challenge that you have for our listeners as they start to kind of move into the rest of their day?
I think with the work that both you and I do, I think that the big thing is for clients to commit to just starting. You don't have to have A through Z figured out. You have to have A figured out, maybe part of B, but that's it. It's one step at a time. You're not working on STUV. You're not. You're going to be working on A, B, C. You don't have
Right.
to worry about all the way to the end of the alphabet. So really the problem is getting overwhelmed by the enormity of what you're trying to do. It's okay. Both Tracy and I, in the work that we do, and even the colleagues that we know, because we know some incredible world-class people. They
Absolutely.
literally, they will begin to work with you, and get this, it's exactly where you are.
And that I think is such a great takeaway is, as coaches, we meet people exactly where they are. As consultants, we meet businesses exactly where they are. And as leaders, how are you meeting your people exactly where they are? So with that, anything else you want to share with our audience today, Byron?
No, I think that the work that we do, the work that Tracy and I do, and even some of our other colleagues I'm thinking of from the predictive index and such, we do what we do because we love it. And we love it's like what Tracy said earlier, when all of a sudden the lights go on and people all of a sudden see themselves within the report of the predictive index. There's something very special. It's almost holy about the moment when people start to see themselves and they get excited and they get hopeful about, oh, this stuff actually can work. And that's the thing about especially the predictive index, EOS, this stuff works. So it's not like I'm trying to sell you anything because I'm not. I just want you to know it's okay to be a little optimistic and hopeful because the stuff really, really
It
does
does.
work.
It absolutely works. Sometimes you adapt it a little bit for your business or your size, but when you have a process that you can follow that people know what the expectations are, now we're halfway there. Wow, what another amazing episode of the People Strategy Podcast. I am so excited to look at my 3 key insights from my conversation with Byron and where those people strategies are to really drive those business results for you. So, my first key takeaway was, what is your big why? And, Byron uses this in a formula: big why equals purpose plus direction. Because guess what? If you know what your big why is and you see that and you look at every single thing in your business through that, it becomes personal to you. And it also becomes personal to those that you are serving. And so, with that insight of that big why, what is the people strategy around that? Well, the people strategy around that big why is really what is your mission, vision, values inside of your business? And when you develop that MVV, and guess what? We've talked about mission, vision, values, I believe, through every single podcast episode that we've had so far on the People Strategy podcast. But when you have that mission, vision, values, that you truly show up in your behaviors and in the decision making, guess what? That is the reason why employees are drawn to you. And so that becomes so much of what is built into your employee value proposition, meaning, hey, why are you an amazing place to work? And so if our, big why and that thing that drives us, that's so compelling to us, is woven through every single thing in the organization. And that might be things like, hey, my big why is I want to grow others bigger than they see themselves. I'm so committed to people reaching and achieving things greater than they thought possible. Guess what? They're going to be so much more engaged to do the work that's needed to be done to hit what our business outcomes are, which means that impacts the profitability on our P&L. That's my first insight. Big why. People strategy is mission, vision, values, and employee value proposition. And then that result is, our what are our profits, or what is that outcome on our P&L. The second insight that I had from my conversation with Byron was, if you take a business out of a community, will the community mourn the loss? Wow, that one really hit me, right? Is, hey, how many businesses have closed through COVID? How many businesses have run their course and they close? And what is that impact on the community? Not just in the jobs that are lost, but in that sense of community, whether that is a restaurant where it's been a gathering place, whether that's a manufacturing facility, whatever that is, that idea of, hey, if our business shuts down, will our community mourn that loss? And shifting that into, we cannot afford to shut down our business because of the impact it has on the community. So that insight on what's the impact on our community, and the people strategy here is really looking at and saying, what is our employee value proposition? How are we truly integrating every single thing we do into the community, where us being here is such a gift to the community, not just in the jobs, but in how we are integrated, how we are, inspiring our community based on the stories that we're sharing. How are we providing opportunities for folks that they would never see otherwise? How are we giving back in our schools, whether that is through job shadowing or job opportunities? How are we doing some of those, pro bono work, whether it is you're a construction firm and there was a huge fire at a church and you're donating the demolition work in order to allow that church to really start to rebuild. So, the business outcome of that, one, it's goodwill, right? And we know that there's great marketing perspectives to that, but the outcome is it actually hits your bottom line. And of course it does. So, our second insight is, what's the impact of your business closure on the community? Or what's the impact of your business on the community? And then your people strategy is, really looking at and developing, why are you a great place to work within your employee value proposition for how you're giving back to the community, and that impact on, that bottom line and that community recognition. And then the third key takeaway that I had was tools. So tools give people a handle that they can pick up and do something with, is what Byron had stated. And so when we think about tools in our business, the people strategy is really, what are those people tools that we are utilizing to allow us to reach our business outcomes? And when we do that and we implement our tools, guess what? We take the guesswork and the constant recreating the wheel out, which is the confusion, which stops people from doing their great work and allows them to go in and do their job and create significant impact day in and day out. That gives us, again, that business outcome, or that result of increased profitability on our P&L. It also gives us an increased impact that we can have on our community. And it also gives us individuals hitting that higher level of what they thought was possible for themselves. And so what I just described to you is a triple bottom line. So if you think about your business, what's the triple bottom line that you want to hit? People, profits, community impact. With that, thank you so much for listening to our show this week. If you are curious about all of the concepts we're talking about, we host a monthly webinar called the People Strategy Roadmap, and I would love for you to join us there. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much for listening today. I'd love to connect with you. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn at Traci, Traci Austin, and at our website at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. If you'd love to learn more about our process, please reach out to us. And again, thank you so much for listening and sharing your feedback with us through a review. Have a fantastic day.